Hi, I'm Frank Paz. I'm a partner at Morrison Foerster in the New York office. I am a partner in the Emerging Companies and Venture Capital Practice Group. I represent venture capital firms, and I also represent startup companies. For startup companies, I represent them throughout the whole life cycle. So I represent early stage companies and later stage companies as well. I try to primarily focus on founders in the pre-incorporation stage, so strategizing on how the company will be formed and scale with the company as they grow. So I'll act as outside general counsel in the day-to-day operations as they're going from their pre-seed rounds all the way through their Series D and exit. I help with employment matters, equity grants, major transactions like a financing, and ultimately through their exit like an M&A event. Today I'll be talking about when is the right time to hire legal counsel and what is the best way to be a client to a law firm or an attorney. So when is the right time to hire legal counsel? The short answer is the sooner the better. A really good attorney will help you strategize and focus on the goals of your company and growing your company. And having an attorney earlier will make sure that your formation and the agreements that you're signing all align with those goals. While I appreciate that it's difficult sometimes for a startup company to engage counsel earlier, and I'll talk about some of those concerns and how to alleviate those concerns later in the video, there are still four, I would say, key moments where hiring legal counsel is of the utmost importance. So the first stage, I'd say, is formation. When you're forming your company, there are so many considerations to keep in mind. Your jurisdiction, for example, the corporate governance of the company going forward, and the equity grants to the founders. And having an attorney at that time explain to you your different options, the pros and cons of those different options, is key to make sure that you have formed your company properly and formed it in a way that makes sense for your business. The second time where it makes really good sense to hire legal counsel and make sure that they're involved is a financing. So pre-seed financing for a SAFE, for example, or a price round. Having legal counsel involved to explain those documents for you, draft the documents, and make sure you understand any asks from investors is really important. A SAFE may oftentimes be accompanied by a side letter, and those side letters are a little bit more complex than the typical YC SAFE, for example. Having an attorney review that side letter with you and make sure you understand what you're agreeing to is key. Another time when it's really important to hire legal counsel is granting equity. So whether that's granting equity to founders that join later, or even advisors. Having legal counsel there to make sure you're following the appropriate corporate governance requirements, and as well as making sure that the actual issuance of equity itself is done correctly is key. Trying to fix equity grants later ends up being way more expensive, or at times impossible. The fourth time I'd say it's really important to have legal counsel by your side is major or complex or material agreements. So the typical example is a company that has worked with a university and they're now negotiating an IP licensing agreement. Those agreements are really long, complex, difficult to understand. Having an attorney that specializes in that area can make sure that you understand what you're agreeing to, who owns the IP, how it's being licensed, and your obligations going forward. That's a prime example of how having an attorney present on an agreement that's material to your business or just complex in nature is really important. The next topic I want to talk about is how to be a good legal client and maximize the benefit from your law firm or your attorney. The first step to doing that is being transparent. Be open and honest with the attorney you're working with about your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. So a good way to do that would be to communicate the outcome that you're looking for on a particular deal or a particular agreement and the timeline in which you need it. Are you looking to do a financing in the next month or so, or by the end of the year? Do you need this commercial agreement done before the end of the month? That sort of communication will help the attorney you're working with really customize and tailor their approach to your needs. Another thing to communicate is, what are you maximizing for? we know what your goals are, but what are the most important parts of that goal? Is it making sure that you keep vote control over the board? Is it just getting the money in the door and nothing else matters? Understanding what the most important parts of the deal and what you're maximizing for will help, again, the attorney customize their negotiation tactic and drafting tactics. What are the personalities like? If somebody is really difficult to deal with or difficult to get to sign a document, that's important for the attorney to know so that they can, again, customize timelines, deadlines, their negotiation tactic to make sure that they're accomplishing your goals. What are you worried about? Are you worried about a commercial agreement that you're negotiating with the strategic investor? If the attorney is only aware about the investment that that entity is doing in your company and they're not aware about your commercial concerns with that same investor, it's difficult for them to make sure that you're protected. So making sure that the attorney you're working with understands what you're concerned about also helps them make sure that you're protected. And lastly, what are the votes like? Is everybody going to vote alongside you? Is the board all on the same page? Are there any investors that are hard to get to sign a document or just disagree with you generally? Having the attorney understand that ahead of time will make sure that they're able to tailor the right timeline and deadlines for the deal and their negotiation tactic to get people to sign documents. Now that you've been open and transparent with your attorney, the next step is to work with them to really strategize how you're going to get to that goal. Is this structure the right structure? Speak with them about what's the most efficient structure to get to your goal. Or what are the things to consider when trying to meet your goal? Your attorney has likely seen this sort of transaction or agreement play out many, many times. And they're able to tell you just from experience what are the things to consider or what the previous founder wished they would have considered that you can now keep in mind going forward. What's required to get it done? Speaking with them ahead of time about what needs to get done in order for you to close that deal, for example, or close that agreement is important. It'll change your strategy on how to meet your goal or your timeline. If you know you need to wait 2 months, for example, to make a filing, that'll impact other aspects of your business that are waiting on that filing to be done. Another way to be a really good legal client is learning from your attorney. So what are the requirements for you to sign this agreement? What are the requirements for you to grant equity? What are the requirements for you to act as a board member? Learning and understanding basic corporate law from your attorney, just soaking up that knowledge is critical. It'll make sure that you know ahead of time what's actually needed to get it done and make sure that you're not making a mistake. You know, at a minimum, I need board approval to grant equity, for example. So you'll avoid just going on to a platform like Carta and just issuing options without talking to the board. Having a basic understanding really helps you set expectations for what's required to get an agreement signed, a deal done, equity issued. Learning from your attorney of all those different aspects is critical. Another way to be a good legal client and maximize the benefit from your attorneys is using them for non-legal advice. So sometimes we have founders that ask us to help review their board deck or help review their pitch deck, give them feedback on what are the right investors to reach out to, what partners make sense to align with. We have founders all the time ask us, hey, is there any way you can help us make an introduction to a particular investor that I'm interested in? I know that you work with them extensively. Sometimes that's permissible. So there are other aspects law firms can provide or assist with that aren't necessarily legal in nature. You should be making sure that you talk with your attorney about what's available or what they're able to do to help you in things that are not just billable work, for example. And the last piece on being a good legal client are fees. So we mentioned earlier that many startup companies have difficulty because in the earlier stages, they just don't have enough cash to pay for a law firm or an attorney to get all of these things right. Working with the right law firm is critical. So especially in the startup space in particular, there are law firms that are dedicated to startup companies. They have different pricing programs, different fee models that you can take advantage of. I wouldn't just go to the first attorney that you know and work with them. I'd shop around, see what law firm fits the best piece for you. Is it because that they are experienced in this particular industry that you're focused in? Is it because they have the right fee model for you? Typical fee pricing programs that you'll see for law firms that are specialized in working with startup companies are deferral programs. So our law firm is a great example where we'll defer anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000 up until your first financing of a certain amount or a year. That's a very classic example of a deferral program that many law firms will implement for startup companies. Discounted rates. So later stage companies or companies that are much larger may pay a standard rate, but a startup company that's just working out of their garage may have a discounted rate to help alleviate the burden of the cost. If you have a project in mind, a really one-off, easy project, you might want to ask what a fee estimate will be, or if it could be capped. Those sorts of conversations with your law firm can make it much more manageable for you to work with them and understand your costs when using legal services, especially in the critical moments of negotiating a complex agreement, for example, or issuing equity to founders. I hope you found this really helpful. I'm excited to be working with LaFamilia and the rest of its community. We're really excited to be partnering together. I look forward to meeting everybody.